I set out for my training run that July morning in 1984, the air crisp and sharp in my lungs as I traced the familiar paths near Big Sky, Montana. Early light cut through the tall pines, painting the forest floor in shifting patterns of gold and shadow. As an athlete, endurance was my focus, so I pushed harder that day, venturing deeper into the woods beyond my usual turnaround point. The narrow game trail I followed was overgrown, weaving between dense spruce where deer often traveled. The ground was uneven and slick with needles, but I welcomed the challenge, the way each step tested my balance and strength. After about an hour, I slowed to catch my breath. That's when I heard it, a sharp crack of a branch somewhere behind me. I froze, listening. Probably a deer, I told myself, or maybe an elk. But then came another snap, heavier this time, deliberate and too steady to be an animal. A prickle crept up my neck. I turned halfway, squinting through the trees. Before I could call out, two men stepped from the shadows of the pines. One was older, mid-50s, with a scruffy beard and eyes hidden under the brim of a sweat-stained cap. His clothes were worn, patched in places. The other was younger, late teens, or maybe 20, nervous but trying to look tough. Both carried rifles. "Morning," the older one said, his voice rough but eerily calm. "We've been watching you run these trails. You're strong. We like that." I stopped cold. "I'm just training," I said carefully. "Do you need help with something?" The younger one shifted, glancing toward the older man. "No, ma'am," he said softly. "We're here for you." My pulse spiked. They stood between me and the trail, blocking my way out. The older man raised his rifle slightly, not aiming it, but enough to send a message. "Come with us quiet-like," he said. "We don't want trouble." I glanced over my shoulder, weighing my chances. The brush was thick. I'd never make it far before one of them fired. "Please," I said, keeping my voice even. "People are expecting me back soon." The older man shook his head. "Not anymore. You're coming with us. My boy here needs a good woman. You'll do fine." The words hit me like ice. "That's not how this works," I said. "You can't just take someone." He chuckled, low and humorless. "Out here, we make our own rules. Been that way a long time. Now walk." They herded me off the trail, rifles steady, pushing deeper into the wilderness. The pines thickened, swallowing sunlight. We climbed for what felt like miles. My calves burned, but I forced myself to memorize the route. A twisted oak, a jagged rock outcrop, a downed log covered in moss. If I got a chance to escape, I'd need every detail. After a while, I asked, "Why me?" trying to keep them talking to learn anything useful. The older man, John, as I later learned, didn't slow. "You've been out here before. We've seen you. You're strong, fit, smart. My boy deserves that. He's a good kid." The younger one nodded. "Yeah," John said, correcting himself quickly. "Alex needs someone who can keep up. We'll build a life up here, away from all that garbage down there." My stomach turned. "People will look for me," I said. "I work at the ranch nearby. They'll notice." John shrugged. "Let them look. These woods swallow secrets. Been hiding here for years." Their camp appeared suddenly, tucked deep in a hollow surrounded by thick pines. A lean-to made from tarps and branches stood beside a smoldering fire pit. Animal hides hung drying between trees. Everything looked scavenged. Old lanterns, tools, scraps of stolen gear. It reeked of smoke, sweat, and something feral. John pointed to a tree. "See." Before I could move, Alex produced a length of chain. He wrapped it around my ankle, fastening it to the trunk with a heavy padlock. The cold metal bit into my skin. "Don't make this harder," he murmured. "We'll treat you right." "This is wrong," I said quietly. "You have to let me go." John crouched by the fire, poking the coals with a stick. "Wrong? The world's wrong. Out there, people lie, cheat, steal. Up here, we're free. You'll learn to see it our way." As the day dragged on, they talked, mostly John. He told stories about hunting illegally, stealing supplies, and living off the land. Alex listened more than he spoke, though when he did, it was about loneliness, about wanting a family. I nodded occasionally, pretending interest, while my eyes stayed busy, scanning the ground, the trees, the chain, looking for anything that could give me a chance. "You hungry?" Alex asked later, offering a strip of dried meat. I shook my head. Not really. Tell me about this life. Why you chose it? John grinned. Started when Alex was a boy. Left the cities behind. No rules, no taxes, no noise, just peace. But every man needs a woman to build something real. That's where you come in. My hands trembled, though I kept them still. I thought of my teammates, my family, everyone who'd start looking once I didn't come back. I tried appealing to Alex's humanity. You're young. You could still have a normal life. This doesn't have to be it. He frowned. Dad says the world's poisoned. He knows best. Night fell slow and cold. The firelight flickered across their faces, turning them into shifting silhouettes. They ate quietly, and I sat chained to the tree, pretending calm while my heart hammered. Sleep came in flashes, restless, shallow, always listening for a chance. Every rustle in the brush sounded like rescue or danger. At dawn, I heard voices in the distance, faint but real, searchers. My chest filled with sudden, painful hope. Quiet, John hissed, grabbing his rifle. Don't say a word. The voices drew closer. Men called my name. I saw movement between the trees. Two figures appeared, Alan and Jim, friend from the ranch. Run! I screamed before I could stop myself. They have guns. John snarled. Shut her up. Alex raised a pistol. For 1 second, our eyes met. He hesitated, but then he pulled the trigger. The impact knocked me back against the tree. Fire tore through my chest. I gasped, choking on blood, the world shrinking to sound and pain. Gunfire exploded. John fired again. Alan dropped instantly, hit in the face. Jim bolted, vanishing into the forest. John knelt beside me, checked the wound. She's done, he muttered. Let's move. They vanished into the trees. I lay there, the dirt beneath me turning dark and wet. My breaths came ragged, shallow. I pressed a trembling hand against the wound, trying to slow the bleeding. The world tilted and dimmed, but I clung to one thought. Breathe steady, stay alive. Training had drilled it into me. Control your breath even when your body screams. Time lost meaning. The sun climbed. Shadows shifted. Then voices again, closer this time. She's here, someone shouted. She's alive. Hands lifted me carefully. I caught fragments of words. Hold pressure, collapsed lung, hang on. The hike out was agony. Every step jarred the wound. At the hospital, the doctors told me the bullet had missed my heart by inches. My right lung had collapsed. Surgery saved me, though it took months before I could run again. John and Alex were caught. Alex first, not far from the camp. John lasted longer, living like a ghost in the backcountry before they cornered him. I testified at both trials, standing before them, my voice steady as I told the story. Years later, I went back to competing, became a veterinarian in Bozeman, built a quiet life. But the woods never felt the same again. I still run the trail sometimes, but never alone and always with that hum of tension in my chest. The mountains are beautiful, but they have a darker silence too, the kind that hides people who think the wilderness belongs to them. And I learned the hard way, it doesn't. My friend Mike has a beach house on the Jersey Shore, and calling it beautiful would be an understatement. To me, it feels magnificent, especially coming from a more modest background. I don't know its full history, as it's not my family's place, but from what I understand, it's been in his family for generations. Mike's grandparents had long wanted to make it their permanent home, but they sadly passed away recently. With no one living there now, the house sits dormant most of the time, since his extended family is on the West Coast and his parents are too busy to use it much. The silver lining in this otherwise sad situation is that Mike essentially has free access whenever he wants. I think his dad considered renting it out for extra income, but finding someone to rent a beach house in the off-season isn't easy, so you can't really blame him. Sometime in mid-July, Mike reached out and asked if I wanted to come down for the weekend. He didn't have to twist my arm. I had no plans, and the idea of relaxing at a nice beach house was an easy yes. His plan was simple. Hang out, maybe hit the beach during the day, then head to the boardwalk at night and just enjoy the shore. It wasn't meant to be a wild party weekend, just a chill escape, and I was genuinely looking forward to it. Since we live close, Mike picked me up that Friday. I tossed my duffel in his trunk, and we made the drive down. The first night was relaxed. We arrived around 6, dropped our stuff in the upstairs bedrooms, and settled in. The house has that cozy, slightly musty beach smell. A mix of salt air and old wood. Not unpleasant, but like it holds decades of family summers. After grabbing a quick bite from a nearby sub shop, we decided to walk the beach to take in the evening. Mike brought a couple of fishing rods, so we tried our luck for a while, though it was less about catching anything and more about just being out there. At one point, we came across a pair of girls our age walking barefoot along the shoreline, and Mike, being himself, struck up a conversation. They were local, or at least semi-local, and it turned into one of those low-stakes, slightly flirtatious interactions that happen when you're young and on the beach at night. We got their numbers, they continued their walk, and we kept fishing. Even though it was peak season and there were plenty of people around, Mike knew all the quiet pockets, private beach access, tucked away paths through the dunes, little spots between houses where the lights didn't reach. We found a nice stretch to ourselves where the only sounds were the water and the wind, the kind of night that lets you forget about real life for a bit. The next morning, we woke around 9 and decided to go for a run along the boardwalk. It was already warm, but a breeze off the ocean made it bearable. We weren't pushing hard, just a couple of miles to get the blood flowing. Mike is pretty active, and I've been trying to stay in shape, so it felt good to move after a night of lounging. The rest of the day slipped by without us really noticing. Later that evening, Mike floated the idea of hitting a few bars in Seaside, but we were both wiped. Even though it sounded fun in theory, the thought of waiting in line and yelling over music didn't align with how our bodies felt after a full day in the sun. We ended up crashing kind of early instead. Sometime after midnight, I woke to a shrill, piercing beeping. At first, I thought it was part of a dream, but after a few seconds lying in the dark, I realized it was real. It sounded like a smoke detector, that sharp, high-pitched alarm that cuts straight through your skull. I threw myself out of bed and scanned my surroundings, trying to pinpoint where it was coming from. It didn't seem to be from my room or anywhere else on the second floor. After focusing, I got the impression it was coming from above me. Without thinking, I yanked my door open and made a beeline for Mike's room, jolting him awake with both hands and telling him to follow me. He immediately understood and hurried after me, not even bothering to put on a shirt. As if our lives depended on it, we bolted up the stairs, completely unsure of what we'd find. The third floor was mostly dark, except for a little moonlight leaking through a window at the end of the hall. We flipped on the lights and started scanning, expecting to see or smell something burning, but there was nothing. No smoke, no flickering lights, no signs of fire at all. It was baffling. After some painfully irritating minutes searching for the source of that god-awful noise, I found something. In one of the bedrooms, tucked neatly under a pillow, was a small black device. Before calling Mike in, I examined it myself, mostly out of pure confusion. It was the size of a walkie-talkie, all black except for a blinking red light on top. That was it. No buttons, no stickers, no screen, just a smooth jet black casing, that blinking light, and what looked like a single switch on the side. I flipped it off, and the beeping stopped immediately. Mike entered the room just then, his eyes flicking from the bed to me to the device in my hand. Neither of us spoke at first. We locked eyes, and I could tell he was just as confused and scared as I was. After a few more seconds of silence, he asked if I'd ever seen that black thing before. I said no, and asked him the same, to which he also said no. For the next hour, we tried to figure out what it was, how it got there, and what had triggered it, but no answer we came up with was satisfying. Mike swore none of his family had been in the house in ages, and I believed him. Why would he lie? Plus, who would put that thing in their own home? You might think it was for safety or a substitute for a faulty smoke detector, but there was no fire, so it hadn't prevented any emergencies. And then the matter of how it had been triggered in the first place, that was the scariest part. We were sitting in Mike's room in the dark when a crazy thought occurred to me. The switch. I pulled out the device and quickly flipped it on and off, and sure enough, the shrill beeping started again and stopped as soon as I flipped it off. Both of us froze, and Mike whispered, "Oh my God." The thought hit us simultaneously. The only way to operate the device was by hand. Someone else had been in the house. We didn't waste any time. Mike dialed the police while I locked the door, barricading it as best I could. We waited for what felt like forever until the police finally showed up. We hurried downstairs to intercept them, gave a brief description of what was going on, and they did a full sweep while we waited outside by the front door as instructed. When they came back downstairs, what they told us was horrifying. Every single window on the third floor was wide open, even the bathroom windows. And it wasn't just that. The beds were flipped, drawers were pulled out of dressers, and everything was on the floor. The room where I'd found the device looked completely ransacked, even though it had been neat when we searched. I felt like I was losing my mind, and so did Mike. But after being escorted upstairs by the officers, we had no choice but to accept the reality. The officers didn't find much else. No one hiding, no prints, no weapons. After another 20 minutes or so, they told us to make sure all the windows were locked and secured from now on, and to call again if anything else happened. And they just left. Mike and I didn't feel safe staying in that house after someone, probably crazy or on drugs, had messed with us in such an inexplicable way. But we had no choice. We told ourselves we'd sleep there the rest of the night and leave early in the morning, and that's what we did. Luckily, whoever had been in the house must have left, because nothing else happened throughout the night. There are still parts of that night I can't explain, and I can only imagine what Mike must be feeling. For all we know, whoever was in that house that night might have never truly left. I always loved the quiet of the Alaskan backcountry, the way it swallowed every trace of noise until all that was left was wind, river, and my own breath. Living in Anchorage, working a desk job that drained the color from my days, those weekend escapes were what kept me sane. Out there, under the endless sky, I could breathe again. That Saturday morning, I drove east toward the Nick River, the truck's tires kicking up dust along a forgotten gravel road. I parked near an old game trail I'd followed once before, one that wound through thick spruce and birch where moose and caribou roamed. The air was sharp with the smell of pine and thawing earth. I slung on my backpack with water, a map, a small knife, and a flare, and stepped into the stillness. The trail felt alive. My boots sank slightly into mossy ground, the soft earth pocked with fresh tracks. Moose, maybe wolf. A magpie called in the distance. I followed the narrow path for nearly an hour, the trees closing in tighter as I went. The forest had that muffled hush, the kind that makes you feel both safe and watched at the same time. I stopped to sip water when I heard it, a twig snapping somewhere behind me. The sound was quick, crisp. I turned, scanning the green shadows between tree trunks. Nothing, just the whisper of leaves. I shook it off and kept walking, but the feeling stuck, an awareness like the woods themselves were holding their breath. Another snap, closer. My pulse began to thud in my ears. "Hello," I called out, my voice sounding small in the vast silence. No reply. I started moving faster, my hand brushing the handle of my knife, though I knew it wouldn't help much. That's when someone stepped out from the trees. He was tall, lean, wearing faded camo that blended with the forest. A rifle rested across his shoulder. His face was weathered, eyes pale and sharp like ice. "You lost?" he asked, his voice flat and calm. I forced a smile, trying not to show the tremor in my hands. "No, just hiking. This trail loops back toward the river, right?" He nodded slowly, studying me like a hunter sizing up a deer. "It does, but it's easy to get turned around out here. Name's Bob. I live nearby. You should be careful. Animals aren't the only things in these woods." Something about the way he said it made my skin prickle. We talked briefly. He said he was checking traps, asked where I was from, if I'd come alone. His questions started feeling too personal, too deliberate. When he asked if anyone was expecting me home soon, I lied and said my roommate knew exactly where I was. He smiled then, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I can show you a shortcut back, a quicker, safer way." I hesitated. Every instinct whispered no, but he looked confident, local, the kind of man who knew these woods by scent. "All right," I said. We walked side by side, the air thick with silence. The trail thinned, overgrown with ferns. I kept glancing at him from the corner of my eye. "You been out here long?" I asked. "Years," he said. "I know every inch. Hunt a lot. There's nothing like it. Chasing something through the trees. Makes you feel alive." Something in his tone chilled me. Before I could respond, he swung his rifle around, aimed directly at my chest. "Don't move," he said quietly. "Hands up." My mind blanked. What are you doing?" "Walk," he ordered, motioning with the gun. I obeyed, trembling. He yanked a rope from his pack, tied my wrist so tight the fibers burned into my skin. "Please," I begged. "You don't have to do this." He laughed, a low sound that froze my stomach. They all say that. We walked for what felt like hours, deep into nowhere. When the trees finally opened up, there it was, a small, weathered cabin swallowed by brush. The windows were boarded, smoke stains up the walls. He pushed me inside. The air reeked of mildew and something metallic, like old blood. He chained my ankle to a post in the corner. "Sit," he ordered. I sank down, trembling. "Why are you doing this?" He sat opposite me, cleaning his rifle with methodical precision. "Because I can. Out here, nobody hears a thing. Nobody finds you unless I want them to." His voice was so calm, so casual that it made my heart ache with horror. He talked about other people he'd taken, how he'd let them run. "Got to make it fair," he said, smiling faintly. "Otherwise, what's the fun?" When he left the room, I tugged at the chain until my ankle bled. It didn't budge. Hours crawled by. When he returned, he handed me a sandwich and a bottle of water, almost gently. "You'll need your strength," he said. That night, I barely slept, shivering on the floor. Around dawn, he crouched beside me and whispered, "We're going for a ride." He drove me to a small airstrip, a rough patch of dirt near the treeline where a bush plane sat waiting. He cuffed my hands, shoved me in the back seat, and took off. The engine roared as the ground fell away, the world below shrinking into endless wilderness. Rivers coiled through untouched forest. There wasn't a single road in sight. He landed on a remote lake, perfectly still, ringed with thick trees. When he pulled me out, he uncuffed my wrists but kept the rifle aimed steady. "Strip," he said. I froze. "No." The gun went off, a deafening crack. Dirt sprayed my feet. "Do it," he hissed. Tears blurred my eyes as I stripped. The cold air bit into my skin. "Now run," he said, pointing to a trail. "You've got 10 minutes. I bolted barefoot, bleeding from the first step. Branches tore my skin, whipping across my face. My breath came ragged and loud in the quiet forest. After a minute, I couldn't hear anything but the drum of my own heart. Then his voice behind me, faint but growing.